Start recording. And do this from the beginning. So the discussion I want to have today is about translating Tai Ahom manuscripts. Now this kind of situation, what we're talking about here with translating Tai Ahom manuscripts, actually applies to some extent with translating texts, with translating the stories and the songs of all the different languages in Northeast India. But the Tai Ahom situation is a special one because this is a language that now mostly survives in its manuscripts. It is still used in some ritual events such as the Soklong marriage and also in the Meda Mepi prayers and a few other situations like that. But most of the information we have about the language comes from manuscripts. So I wanted to start off by talking about the project that I was involved in with Chai Chun, Kamdengyo Tai, with Poppy Gogoi, and with Medini Mohan and others, Iftikhar Rahman also giving a great deal of help. And you can see all of them in this photograph on this website. A project to document and to some extent conserve and also archive Tai Ahom manuscripts. So basically we managed to photograph more than 500 different manuscripts, around about 15,000 pages altogether, and all of these are now archived in the British Library. And this is the website where you can find them. If you just type Tai Ahom EAP, which stands for Endangered Archives Program, into your web browser, you will come up with a reference to this particular program. And this is the heading page. This is just a screenshot of it, so you can see some information. And I want in particular to show you how to search. So I'm putting up here the link to the searching mechanism for this. And the particular manuscript that we will search for is the Mingmunglung Pai manuscript that belongs to Jau Tilesha Mohan, who lives in Sibsagar district. You can find that by searching for Tilesha Mohan. If we go back to the previous slide, you'll see up on the top right-hand corner, search our website. If you search for Tilesha Mohan, you then go to view archives from this collection. You then go down to the Mingmunglung Pai entry and then press on view images from this file, and this is what you will get. Now this has on the left-hand side all of the photographs that we took of that particular manuscript. All of them were taken with a ruler, with a measurement, and also with a color chart. Now the reason for that is so that at some point in the future, we will know the size of each particular page of document, because these hasipat, these bark manuscripts, the size of them varies considerably from very small ones to very big ones. So, and you can see this is quite a large manuscript because that is I think a 30 centimeter ruler bigger than which this manuscript is. And the color is there so that at some point, you can restore the original color of the document as well. I don't know how to do that, but that's the reason why the color is there. But we can blow up the size of this manuscript so that all of the words on it are easily readable. So I wanted to start off by saying that what you do have is this significant resource, which is 15,000 photographs available for anyone that has internet to look at. And I had also left copies in various locations in Northeast India, but the more reliable long-term method of storage and accessibility is through libraries. They can also be downloaded. So what is the process of translation of these manuscripts? Well, the first thing is to identify what we think the contents of the manuscript are. And if we go back to this Mingmunglung Pai, this name does not, in my memory, occur in the manuscript at all, but it is clearly a manuscript about searching for the spirit, about spirits becoming lost, kon, in the Tai language, becoming lost and being called back. So this we knew before this was photographed. That's the first stage. But the actual stage of studying these manuscripts, we would first want to transcribe the Ahom text and then transliterate this Ahom text into the Roman script. So this is to help with working out the pronunciation of it. But the real work is to translate it, to take it from one language into another. And the way we have been doing this over a number of years, and more maybe 5-10 years ago than recently, is to ask Ajahn Chaitun Kamdengyod Thai, a real expert in Thai languages, in Thai literature, a speaker of Shan, a speaker of Standard Thai, a speaker of many different Shan varieties, with an enormous vocabulary of Thai words. Get a draft translation from him and then work with him to make an English translation from the Shan translation, and then discuss and revise the translation. So here's a photograph, which those of you who have come before to some of these lectures have seen this. Here's a photograph of the cooperative process. So we have Chaitun on the right, sitting with Medini in the middle, discussing the meaning, and Zinat Tabasum from Gauhati University entering the data into the computer, typing the words and typing the translations. So, but I want to talk today mostly about the linguistics, the language study that leads to this. So, what do we do? So we're going to start with an example, not from that particular manuscript, but from the manuscript called Nang Kai. And you will see, this is a photograph of the manuscript. It's a much smaller manuscript than the Ming Munglong Pai. And the arrow points to the place where the sentence we're going to look at comes from. And the sentence we're going to look at simply runs from where that arrow begins to the end of the line. And this is what it looks like. So the first two words are actually a combination, kau kam. Then we have ngin pan, namta, ba kam kam. Now the Tai Ahom language is one that we cannot know exactly how it is pronounced. Now I've just received a message from someone asking, has this streaming started already? And I hope that it has, but just want to, yeah. So anyway, so what we see here, this is an example of the translation of an Ahom text. At the top, we have the Tai Ahom script. Underneath that, word by word, we have an approximate pronunciation. We don't really know how the Tai Ahom language was pronounced. Underneath that, we have a word by word or meaningful element by meaningful element, what in linguistics we call morphemes, meaning. And underneath that, we have the Standard Shan translation of this. Now, Standard Shan has all of these words in pretty much exactly the same form as they occur in Ahom. But Standard Shan has some advantages because it is a script that marks the tones, and therefore you can read the correct meaning into every word. So the tones in the Shan are marked by these small circles. The double circle looks like what would be in English a colon marker, or a single circle, or a comma, or a circle and a comma, which looks like the semicolon marker. These are the tone marks, and these distinguish different meanings in Shan that would not be distinguished in Tai Ahom. So for example, at the beginning of this line, we have a word kam meaning gold, but at the end of the line, we have kam kam, which means profusely. These both have the syllable come, but it would be pronounced differently. It is pronounced differently in standard Shan, and it possibly would have been pronounced differently in Ahom also. Okay, so the translation, rather poetic translation, the golden horned one fell sad, his tears soaking profusely. But literally it just says, horn gold feels sad, water I soak profusely. Come at the end we can translate as profusely. And one of the reasons why we want to study the text of Tai Ahom is to see how the grammar is different from, for example, English or Assamese. So let's have a look at what some of those differences are. So the first is there's no obligatory marking of tense. Now this is a feature in English and in Assamese that you cannot avoid. So in English, we have to say the golden horned one felt sad and put it into the past tense, or we could have said feels sad and put it into the present tense, but English will not allow us not to say which tense it is in, whether it is past or whether it is present. But the Tai Ahom does not require the marking of tense. A second difference with English from English is that there are no articles. So English is a language which uses a lot of the and a. So we had the golden horned one felt sad. The golden horned one refers to one of the characters in this story who is known simply as horn gold, which means golden horn, because the adjective comes after. But in English, we can't just say gold horn. We have to say the golden horned one, the one that has golden horns, something like this. The will be there. And when we get to the tears, I put his, because it is a male character. And in English, we don't just say tears soaking profusely. We'll say his tears, her tears, their tears. But these are features that the Tai Ahom language does not require. So there's no articles and there's few or no pronouns. On the other hand, there are modifying phrases. And an example of the modifying phrase is what we see at the end with come, meaning profusely. Now this modifying phrase, what does it modify? Does it modify the soaking? Does it modify the tears, the namta? Or does it modify the sadness? It could mean the golden horned one felt profusely sad, his tears soaking. Or it could mean the golden horned one felt sad, his profuse tears soaking. All of these meanings are possible because a final modifying phrase at the end of an Ahom sentence like this can modify something earlier in the sentence than just the thing it appears immediately after. Okay, another feature of Ahom language which it's important to know about is classifiers, or numeral classifiers as they are sometimes thought. These are the things that we use to count nouns with. So if we're talking about images, we would say songko. For people, songkun, that would be two people. For sets of clothing, kung, songkung, two sets of clothing. For animals, songtu, two animals. That also applies to heavenly bodies like stars or planets. For trees, songtun. For things that come in short pieces, songton, etc. For pots, songmo. For flat things down the bottom, songpun. For respected persons or gods, songra. For houses or flowers or hills or round things or children, songluk. For houses, songlang. Some of these are exactly the same as we see in standard Thai, and some are different. So classifiers will be there, and they also change the way the language works. And the other thing that we find is we get elaborate expressions like tak lu tak bang, meaning will be ruinous. Now here, tak means the future time, will happen. Tak lu will be ruined. Tak bang will come to ruin. Together, tak lu tak bang makes a 4-syllable phrase or an elaborate expression. These are very common all across the southeast and east part of Asia. In China, they're often called 4-character expressions because they'll be written with 4 separate characters. And it is very frequently the case that 4 is preferable to 2. You could simply say tak lu will be ruined, will be ruinous, but it's much more suitable in speaking and writing to use these 4 syllables. And I have heard some of the older people telling stories in the Tai Ahom and Tai Pake village using these elaborate expressions very carefully and very poetically. Similarly, luk su luk dong, meaning soldiers. Luk, child, su, war, luk su, soldier, luk dong, dong may not have any independent meaning of itself. It may mean other things, but in this phrase, it helps to complete a 4-syllable expression or an elaborate expression. Okay, so I wanted to talk again about this idea of modification, because the modification certainly is an interesting feature. Okay, so we have this sentence, and this occurs in the Ming Mung Rong Pai, the example I showed you earlier from Tileshu Mohan's collection, the one that I demonstrated on the Endangered Archives Program British Library website. And at this point in the text, there is a discussion about where the kon, the spirit of the country, might have gone, from which it will be called back. We'll see this again in a minute. But the translation, there are 5 words here: Sangkong Tai Men Kang, stay, hill, near, men. Men is a word for hill tribals, can be used, for example, to mention Nagas, but there are other different people that live up in the hills, and it's a more general term. Kang, shut in. So the shut in, so the first 4 words mean staying in a hill near the hill tribals. Well, the hill tribals live in hills, so that all makes sense. So the idea here would be that the spirit, the kon, has gone up into the hills and it needs to be called back from there. But the final word kang, meaning shut in, does it mean who is shut in? Is it the kon that is shut in, staying near the hill tribals? Or is it the hill tribals that are shut in into those hills? In terms of the poetics, right? So in terms of the grammar of this sentence, and this is one of the features of the Tai Ahom language, that it is, the grammar is not specific about who is shut in at this point. It can be either, as in sentence A, if it stays shut in, maybe by the hill tribals or near the hill tribals, or the hills in the hills near to the hill tribals. That means in sentence A, the spirit is shut in, but sentence B, it stays near the hills where the hill tribals are shut in. In sentence B, it is the hill tribals that are shut in. Now, this kind of grammatical structure where you have different kinds of possible modifications, this can't happen in English, or as far as I know in Assamese. That is to say, you would never have this type of ambiguity. And this is one of the reasons why translating Ahom manuscripts is interesting. Okay, so this is a photograph of the piece of the text relating to the commencing part of the piece of the text relating to where the spirit might be. And down on the bottom, on the 9th line, I don't know if you can see the cursor, as I move it here, but if you can, just, I think it's the 9th line, yes, just towards the right-hand side of the 9th line, it says something like, something, or something like that. And this means come back. Let's have a look at that sentence more closely. Come back, Lord. Now, how do we know that this is what it means? Well, one of the reasons why we know that this is what it means is that similar texts to this are found in the Tai Pake, Tai Kamyang, Tai Aituan, and Tai Kamti, and possibly originally also even in the Tai Trung, although I've never seen one of these manuscripts in the Tai Trung village, Lik Hong Kwan, where similar things are said. So we know, we can assume that this is the meaning because in related languages, they have texts with meaning like this. But anybody that's been looking at Ahom language would know that the first word, mau or mau, can mean you or leaf or new. The second word, go, can mean a clump, can mean to start, can mean a friend, can mean a classifier for humans, and ma can mean dog or horse or come, but this could also be a variant spelling of ba, meaning shoulder, fan, sheath, mad. So with all these different meanings, and there are more even than the ones I just mentioned, there are a large number of possible different meanings, just let's say for the first couple of words. So for example, that if we assume that go, second word, meant friend, it could mean you, friend, come. And this is not an unsensible meaning. But we think that most likely the go here is what we call a linking word, translatable something like also, but not actually needing to be translated at all. And that this is probably what it means. Now, because there are no speakers of Tai Ahom that we can go and ask what is the actual meaning of these word by word, we have to rely on speakers of related Shan and Tai languages for their expertise. Notice here that the Tai Ahom text has got 7 words and the English translation only 4, right? So even though we can declare that there is a meaning for each of the words in the English, when we make a translation, we don't put it together. So for example, at the end, this is a vocative. I write the sound with the letter V. This is a vocative, and this vocative sound, this vocative particle, is what you use to call the attention of someone you're talking to. So you could say, oh Lord. So jiao would be something like, oh Lord, when you are addressing the Lord. In the reverse order to English, right? We put the addressing word oh first, and the word for Lord, which is jiao, respected person, second. And we would say, oh Lord, but in Tai Ahom, you say the reverse. Jiao you say it the other way around. You put the term, the name for the person you're talking to, the jiao first, and the vocative word second. And there are also a couple of particles there, de and na. De and na are both examples of particles, and these particles, these sentence level particles, are available to be used. They mark the whole sentence. You could probably translate that by truly, de na, you could translate by truly. So you could probably translate the whole thing as come, please come truly, O Lord, or something like that. But it's some of the words which occur in the Tai Ahom text don't actually need to be present in the English. Some of you might be able to hear the rain coming down on the roof here. It hasn't rained in Melbourne properly for weeks and weeks and weeks, and we need our winter rains, and I'm very happy of it. But if you can hear it, I hope it's not disturbing the recording. Okay, now I wanted to talk you through an example of a discussion of a process that we went through in trying to work out the translation of one section of this. So going back in this particular, the context is very important here. We need to know what is the context in which a particular sentence is spoken in order to be able to translate it. And what we know of this particular section of text is this is the bit where the spirit is being called back using the words on the previous slide, Malko Martina Jaoi, come back, come, O Lord, O Spirit. And then the text will say, maybe the spirit is in this location. We saw an example of that before too. So when Ajahn Chaityan and I were working on this, and we did this translation, mostly in the house of Badreshwar Phukon, there in Parijat village, a house where I enjoyed many times to stay. The first translation we came up with was Men Ru Ri Nang Ru Ba, meaning men meaning a hill tribal, Ru meaning a head, Ri meaning long, Nang meaning to sit, Ru meaning a head, and Ba meaning shoulder. And the translation was something like the long-headed Nagas. So Menruri was describing the hill tribals in the sort of poetic language of the Ahoms. And I think when they talk about long-headed, they're thinking about those wonderful helmets that the Nagas wear and the wonderful headdresses that they have, which makes them look longer. And Nangruba sitting on the shoulder. Now this could mean that the Nagas are sitting on the shoulder, or it could mean that the spirit is sitting on the shoulder of the Nagas. Our translation suggests the first, but it could mean the second. However, what I remember is that one morning very early, Ajahn Chaityan woke up and came in. He was living in the next house, and in Udoy's house, actually, and he would come in to me. He came in to me and he said, this translation is not correct. It should be like this. Menru Ri Nangru Ba. The long-headed Nagas. No, I think that translation is wrong. I have failed to put in the correct translation there. I'm sorry about that. So what this should actually mean is that it is with the long-headed Nagas whose heads are like horses, or the long-headed hill tribals whose heads are like horses. So you can imagine the Tai Ahom people thinking about the amazing and wonderful headdresses of the Nagas and how long those appeared to be. Now, I'm sorry that that translation was not corrected. So what I was trying to achieve in this discussion, and I'm not sure I have done it as effectively as I would like, is to talk to you about some of the issues involved in translation. And if we go back to this slide number 14, the important thing here is that we can't just look at all of the different meanings that particular individual words can have and just kind of throw them together. So yes, it is true that the first word mau or mau can mean you or leaf or new, and that the second word go can mean clump or start or friend or be a classifier or a linking word, etc. But what we're looking for here is the context of this. Now, there's an enormous number of Tai Ahom manuscripts remaining to be translated. I've said it in the past that it is a pity that the many resources that are available for the Tai Ahom community could not be put towards spending some more money, for example, to get Ajahn Chaitun to help out with translation of more of these texts, because the next generation of Shan scholars are not going to have the level of knowledge of these traditional texts that are available still today. This is a very time-consuming process, but it's also important for understanding the grammar of the language. And if we go back, and this will be the final point I want to make here, even to this example, this tells us so many things about the grammar of Tai Ahom. Sang kong tai men kang. If it stays near the hills where the hill tribals are shut in, that's example translation B, or if it stays shut in by or near the hill tribals, near to the hills. The point is that in the English translation, there are so many what we might call grammatical words. If, in, by, the, to, the. And none of these things are present in the Tai Ahom text. And this is a really important thing to understand, that there will be words that are required by the English translation that are not present in the Ahom, and vice versa. And this is often the hardest thing to deal with in moving from one language to another. Not only do we have to learn a whole set of new words, but there is not a one-to-one correspondence. We're not just replacing an English or an Assamese word by an Ahom one and using language that way. We have to understand the structure of the language. Okay, so I'm going to finish there, and I'm going to stop the sharing and switch off the recording.